I'm an American living in New Zealand, and I've been living here in Aotearoa, New Zealand for the last 11 years. And one thing that I'm really thankful for in New Zealand is that we have a minimum wage that, for the most part, goes up every year, regardless of who is in power. Compared to the United States, which requires an act of Congress to pass a bill into law, which will be signed by the president. Now, right now, the United States federal minimum wage is at $7.25 per hour. Now, the good news is that states can individually raise their minimum wages, and they have, but surprise, surprise, the majority of the ones that have raised it beyond the federal minimum wage of $7.25 are generally Democratic states. So here is a 2025 map of all of the states. And you can see that California, Oregon, Washington, Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, they're sort of like left-leaning states. And then you go on the East Coast, you've got Rhode Island, Connecticut, New Jersey, Delaware. They've all raised their minimum wages. But surprise, surprise, if you look at Pennsylvania, Indiana, Tennessee, Kentucky, Texas, Oklahoma, that's why you guys are suffering so badly under this crushing inflation. Now, other countries, they raise their minimum wages nationally across the board so that you're not penalized for living in a state where you have a backwards politician who doesn't want to raise your wages for you. So here's a graph of New Zealand's minimum wage increase since 2013. This is actually an old graph. We're now sitting at about $23 per hour. But you can see that almost every single year it goes up by 50 cents. And then later in the 20-teens, it starts to go up by about $1 every year, if not more. So just to be clear, between 2013 and 2025, which is 12 years, the federal minimum wage for New Zealand has gone up $10. So just to put that in context, if the United States minimum wage had gone up $10 between 2013 and today, your federal minimum wage across the entire country would be at $17.25. So if you live in a state that's run by a Republican governor and you are sending Republican congressmen and women and senators to Congress, they're not working for you guys. They're just not. And you wonder why you cannot keep up with the cost of living when inflation has gotten so bad. Okay, so a lot of people argue, well, when you raise the minimum wage, that's inflationary. Actually, it's not. It stimulates the economy and it puts money back in the hands of people who need it. But moreover, let's look at this graph. CEO pay versus worker pay from 1978. Look at that. CEO compensation has skyrocketed 1,460%. Worker compensation has gone up 18%. You can't tell me that they can't afford to give you guys more minimum wage pay. Now, luckily in New Zealand, we have something called the Minimum Wage Act of 1983. They have to review it, and the Minister of Labor may, whether in that year or subsequently, make recommendations to the Governor General regarding the adjustments that should be made to the minimum wage. So this means every year, Parliament doesn't have to have a long drawn-out fight about whether or not to increase the minimum wage, because politics doesn't really get involved. France, Australia, Denmark, Great Britain, Canada, Korea, and Japan all have much better minimum wages than the United States. They are adjusted for US dollars, so you can really see the real comparison. New Zealand isn't on this graph, but if you were to change the New Zealand dollar to the US dollar, we would sit at around $13 to $14 per hour minimum wage. But at the end of the day, I just have to come back to this graph. The CEO pay compared to worker compensation, I don't think Congress, how broken it is going to raise the minimum wage for the United States. It's not going to happen. So if you are in a red state controlled by Republicans, you might have a choice to make. Either move to a state where you're going to get better pay or move right out of the country altogether. Lastly, I just want to point out that the tipping culture is not a thing here in New Zealand. If you are a server, a barista, or a beauty technician, or a hair salon person, you're making that minimum wage, and you do not have to rely on your charm or your luck for tips. You're making your federal minimum wage every single day. Which means that if I lost my job tomorrow, I could at least go out and be a barista or work at a grocery store or work, in hospitality in a restaurant and make over $23 an hour. And that is something that comforts me, that we won't be broke and destitute, because at least I can go out and get a job tomorrow that pays at least way better than the United States federal minimum wage, that's for sure.